Welcome to On the Bookshelf. I'm Pete Solomon. Challenges. We all face challenges in our lives almost every day. But what if we had to face a catastrophic challenge, a dangerous challenge, and we've had to face challenges aside from our best friends? That's the premise of the book, The River at Night by Erica Ferencik. 4 women decide to take their vacation together, not at a 5-star resort, but in the Maine woods. They want to go river rafting, and they face the greatest challenges of their lives. The River at Night by Erica Ferencik. And now we get a taste of the book read by the author.
I'm going to just read 4 short sections. The first one is when the women are just starting out on their drive to the Allagash territory. After Portland, where the rocks in the bay at low tide looked like slumped over bodies, the miles seemed to fall away more quickly behind us. Green became the rule, man-made structures the exception. Trees shot up taller somehow, sprouted thickly even in the median strip, creating a forest there just as lush as the one rushing by on our right. Trucks roared past us, groaning with the incomprehensible weight of hundreds of massive logs. I thought longingly of the outlets in Kittery we'd blown by, all the charming B&Bs in the Yorks and Algonquin. Rachel Googled northernmost Starbucks in Maine, mumbling something about stopping there for one last latte. Sandra did her best to hold on to NPR, but we lost even that around Lewiston. So now the women are traveling through Maine, going north. We drove mostly in silence, as one does when entering another world, through Grindstone, Stacyville, Knowles Corner. Here, signs of initial excitement about a new business venture appeared to be followed by the marks of a much longer-lasting and enduring despair. A colorful placard announcing Daddy-O's lobster rolls sported a grinning cartoon lobster, but the arrow pointed to a darkened trailer that tilted helter-skelter in a swampy field. $5 bought you a rain-soaked mattress propped up by chairs in a front yard. By the time we reached Patton, it seemed people had even given up on naming things. A sign outside a rotted motel said, "Motel." The word guns, painted in 20-foot letters, covered one side of a barn. On a hand-painted shingle, a restaurant announced that food was available within. So, I'm going to read a short section of when the women get on the river for the first time. In seconds, the power of the river moving beneath me silenced every thought in my mind. The bank receded quickly behind us. At only a couple of feet deep and around 40 feet across, the river rested like a giant in its rough bed of granite and slate, murmuring and turning, dreaming its big water dreams of endless falling and flowing, gathering its strength for horrors none of us could imagine. Reeds that had stood tall near the banks were now flattened by the current. I know we all felt it even then while the Titan was sleeping, that there was a force larger and more terribly powerful in charge that we'd better heed above all our petty infighting. The impression of riding something sensate was unmistakable. Even when we steered the raft with our oars and Rory's terse direction, the river had its own idea of where we would go and what would happen to us. Still, I did my best to master the stance Rory had demonstrated in his lesson. Arms straight out, paddle flat, and dug in deep, then pull. We did what he said exactly. And then one more short section. The women lose the raft, I'll give that much away. Afterwards, they're having to deal with the night coming on. We sat huddled together, quaking and whimpering, arms around each other, legs pressed together like one four-headed creature. As if the river at night possessed the answers, we were quiet, listening to its pulse and hush. It gleamed with the remnants of the day until it mirrored the moon in glistening shards. Then that too disappeared, as if the river had swallowed it, and the current folded into its nighttime self, braiding and turning like liquid metal in the green and gloom. Full-on darkness and all its terrors. I suddenly understood cultures that believed in demons and chimera, werewolves and golems. With no walls around us, no light or source of warmth, what besides the monstrous makes sense? Every sound was a beast.
The book is The River at Night, written by Erica Ferencik. Thank you.
Yes,
for being with us.
Thank you, Peter. Thanks for having me. This is wonderful.
I want to begin by asking about a comparison that's been made to this book before.
Okay.
Some people have suggested it's almost sort of the distaff deliverance. James Dickey wrote a wonderful book that was published in 1970. His friends were racing down canoeing in Georgia. Yours are in Maine on a raft. When you first heard this suggestion, were you flattered or were you tempted to say, hey, this is my book, it's a lot different? What was your thought?
Well, I read Deliverance, and I am quite open with the fact that it was a huge inspiration for the book. I loved that book. But I felt it was time to write a version, a 2017 version with women in Maine having, it's a much different adventure. Not exactly the same things happen. It's different culturally, and I think it totally works on its own. And I did do some very, very conscious sort of nods to Deliverance.
I'm going to ask you a question on
yeah,
those. Is it not a coincidence that Ed Gentry, who is the first-person narrator of Deliverance,
yeah.
and Winifred Allen, who is the first-person narrator of your fine book, they're both graphic artists?
They're both graphic artists. They're both graphic artists. And the son, Ed's son in Deliverance, his name is Dean.
And a very important character in this book.
And a very important character in this book is named Dean. Also, I was conscious of the town called Dickey, where they end up. But actually, that's a coincidence, because there really is a town called Dickey, and it really is the last town before. So anyway, but I wanted to give him as many sideways winks and nods as I could, because it's such a propulsive, beautiful book. I mean, he was a poet, I thought, it was a great movie, too.
I want to digress for just a second.
Sure.
We'll come back, of course, to talk about your book, but for a minute, I want to talk about you.
Oh, boy. I'm in
Van
trouble
Illinois.
now. Oh, God.
You were a painter.
I was.
You got your BA from the University of Massachusetts in painting and French.
I did.
And then you sort of made a right turn, went to BU, and got your master's in creative writing.
A 10-year right turn.
You literally gave up painting. Why?
I did. I wish I knew. I say that on one hand. The other hand, I think I know. I felt like with painting, there were 20 years there when I felt like I was expressing everything I could express. But then I guess that all that time I'd been falling in love with writing, since I was a child, and I just woke up and said, I can't express everything I want to express with paint. I just can't. Maybe someone else can. But I need, we need to start working with words. And I found that I wanted to do both, but I found that to be impossible, and also support myself and do all the things one needs to do in life. And I feel like, what you put your energy in tends to bear fruit. So, yeah, it took me a while to figure that out. Like, I'll do everything. But you just can't. I can't. I mean, some can.
I can't imagine a writer with a more eclectic collection of works than yours. Could we talk a little bit about the other things you've written, just briefly?
Sure.
Well, you wrote Cracks in the Foundation.
I did.
Which I'm told, I haven't had the opportunity to read it yet, is a hysterically funny book about a real estate woman.
Yep.
I also have it on good information that you spent about 10 years working in sketch comedy and stand-up comedy.
I did.
So what's the difference
What's
between
the
writing?
dealio?
Well, you're writing a routine, you're writing a book.
Oh, boy.
Is there a correlation between looking for the laughs?
It's funny because I do a separate talk called Published My 30-Year Journey to Overnight Success, where I talk about, all the different things I went through. I felt that it's hard for people want to put you in a category. It's human nature. So it's hard when people hear, oh, so you write thrillers, but you also were a stand-up. So how does that work? Well, first of all, I think humor is such a basic part of human nature. I mean, and if you look at any joke, it showcases the dark side. Any joke that makes you laugh, any joke with any teeth. it showcases some sort of truth. So I felt that doing stand-up for me was not only fun and also painful many times, but it's like instant publication, right? And you know whether or not you're funny, or you're funny according to those drunk people or whatever. You know what I mean? You're just so. But again, I did reach a point where like, do I want to do this the rest of my life? And I decided against that, and then I went into screenwriting. Actually, you get into
tell
that.
Tell us about mob.com.
Oh my God, you're going. This is ancient history. Mob.com. I went into screenwriting after. I started this craziness in 1987. This writing craziness, and I went through these phases of novels, stand-up, screenwriting, back to novels. The screenwriting period was born out of frustration of not being able to get several novels that I had written published. And I thought, oh, maybe it's easier to write a screenplay, fewer words. It turns out, even though I wrote many of them, it's just as hard, but in different ways, which I can go into. But I totally loved writing screenplays. Writing screenplays taught me structure, taught me how to write books, ironically. I loved my master's at BU, that was great, but it was when I started writing screenplays that I started to understand dramatic structure, not just in the scope of the book, but within each scene. And I understood dialogue, and I understood, the trajectory of a story. So I don't feel like, even though I wish this had happened earlier for me, that time was wasted,
I just want to take a second to ask you about a book that you actually collaborated on.
Yeah.
Radio personality Ron DeLazy
yes.
is along with you. Are responsible for the book Radio My Way.
Radio My Way.
That was a fun exercise.
He is just a doll. He is as he sounds on the radio, but he is as charming in real life. But he is also hilarious and great company, and just a really loving guy. And all those things are really good because I spent a lot of time with him. He was in my living room for 2 years. We collaborated on this book, and we went through some rough times to get it together, but ultimately it happened. And that's like my ghostwriting side. My sort of editing, ghostwriting side.
Mm-hmm.
That is fun, but separate from this sort of writing, as you can tell.
And separate from repeaters. Would that be considered a horror book?
Repeaters. I do resist terms like pure horror. I see it as a supernatural thriller with elements of horror. People have read Repeaters, and said, oh my God, I was so scared and terrified and there was so much death. But when in reality, there's one death. And it's 2 sentences. But what is in that book and what is in this book is dread, and that is a device. And, Stephen King uses it, and anyone writing in this genre uses it. It's like, I made you scared, and I made you turn the page.
Speaking of dread, you wrote Hot, Naked, and Awake.
Oh, God. So you're bouncing around. So back to humor. So in Hot, Naked, and Awake, Notes from the Burning Edge of Menopause. Yes, I wrote that book. It's actually just a short collection of essays. When I turned 50, I was like, I also write essays and sell them. Mm-hmm. So I put together a collection and created that.
And your latest book, of course, is The
River
at Night.
Night. Yes.
How long did it take?
This book was sort of like a baby. It took 9 months to write the first draft.
Let's clarify.
Let's clarify. It takes place to the first draft. I see how I did that. But it took altogether 5 years to publication because of many rewrites, and the whole publishing process takes at minimum a year. Mm-hmm. From the day that it's accepted, purchased, to publication is a minimum of a year. So it's been a wonderful experience.
Let's talk about the characters. Now,
Sure.
the book is written in the first person. Winifred Allen is in an unfulfilling job, and her 15-year marriage has ended, and she's still mourning the loss of her brother. And she's not the type of person that would want to go rafting.
Nope.
But she allows her friends to talk her into it. Tell us a little bit about how you created Winnie Allen.
You know, that's a great question. I've also been asked the question, who are you in the book? You know, and
You're a little bit of everybody, aren't you?
I'm a little bit of everybody. I'm terrified of everything like Winifred Allen. I'm big and tall and adventurous like Pia, and I think I was much more like Pia as a younger woman. You know, I'm bossy sometimes like Rachel, and I'm a big blubbery heart like Sandra. You know, so that was very perceptive of you. Yeah, I mean, I think I am a little of them, and not any one of them altogether. I think it's very hard as a writer not to sort of it's very hard to get away from yourself and say, okay, so, I mean, even if you're writing some incredibly wild science fiction story, I mean, you're in there. As much as maybe even you'd rather not be. I mean, you know.
Are there personal friends of yours that read this book and said, that's me?
There are, and they're not. That's weird too, I think. These are none of my friends. Some of them, you know, some elements of them are even from people talking about other people, and I thought, oh well, that would be interesting to meet someone like that. And I didn't do it because I'm afraid of writing about someone. Because it's funny, people can read about themselves. I can write about somebody right here, and someone can read it and not see themselves. But conversely, I can write about someone who's not that person reading, and they say, that's me. So it's all weird. You know, it's all very subjective, and I can't control it. The only thing I can control is trying to write a good story, you know.
One of the reasons
and not get sued.
One of the reasons that makes this a good story is the dynamic between Winnie and Pia, because Pia is as confident as Winnie is not confident.
Right. That's true. That's true. I tried to create these opposing viewpoints and desires and personalities, because you know, you need contrast, you need conflict, you need you know, that sort of thing.
And it all comes together.
It all comes together. Yeah.
But the other two women in the book, Rachel and Sandra, they're dealing with their own demons. Rachel, a nurse who had to live through her addiction, and Sandra, a cancer survivor who may not have a marriage when she comes home.
Right, right. Yeah, and I guess the part of the story is to throw these women or put these women in a very primal setting where they have to deal with this or have it be put in perspective anyway, so that when they get back, they can, you know, have grown a bit.
So you've rafted yourself 4 times?
I have, yeah. Around 4 times. The earliest was in the early 80s when there really were no rules. I mean, the helmets were optional. I think even vests were optional. I mean, it was crazy. Yeah.
Crazy scary?
Crazy. Well, crazy like a little bit more wild and a little bit more just unregulated. And also, I've done the crazy scary, and I'm done with it. You know, I'm done with physical danger. You know. However, I am going to Peru in 2 weeks to the rainforest to research my next book. So that's a
Buena suerte.
Yeah, thanks. I got to learn Spanish too. That reminds me.
Good luck.
Thanks.
Now, Maine, and specifically the Allagash Wilderness, is essentially a character in the book.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I wanted to personify the wilderness and have it be something that almost has its own mind, you know, and impact their journey. Yeah, absolutely.
There are 2 characters in the book, and certainly I don't want anybody to be disappointed because I've let on a little too much. No spoiler alerts here.
Okay.
But 2 characters in the book in Maine who essentially live off the grid.
They do.
And I understand from your research there are people like that, aren't there?
There are people like that. Yeah, I did a 9-day trip to the Allagash Wilderness. At first, I wasn't going to do it, and then I realized I had never been north of Portland, Maine. I mean, that's ridiculous. I mean, I got in my car and I went. Yeah, I didn't know anyone, and so I called the Chambers of Commerce right up through Fort Kent, and they said, well, you know, they live off the grid because they don't want to talk to people, you know. But I pushed, and finally I set up these interviews, and I went, and it was amazing. I ended up staying in a yurt and staying in a rehabbed bus and a boat on land, and really, really talking to some. I always had my mace with me, and I made sure that I felt safe the whole time. The people were sort of vetted by other people. But it was a great journey. It was cold. It was December, so
wow.
It was very cold. Yeah,
that leads us
it's
to
stupid that I did, but I just like, oh well, you got to do what you got to do when you got to do it. You know.
Yes. So this is how the characters Simone and Dean were created. This is apparently what you thought, or what the people that you talked to gave you. What do you think they thought of you?
What do I think
What
they
do
thought
you think
of
the
me?
people you
Oh.
interviewed thought of you?
Oh, well,
coming from
I mean,
the city and
I know, city girl, you know, with your smartphone. I think I don't know if I wasn't on the defensive, but I was very clear, and I said, look, I'm writing fiction. I'm not going to use your names, and I never did. I took a couple pictures, but unfortunately I can't use them because I said I wouldn't, and I didn't, and I haven't. I tried to assure them that there was nothing that I was going to literally take from them, their identity. And it's true, actually. I mean, I had the characters of Simone and Dean running around in my mind, but I also talked to a forest ranger because I wanted to know, can you really disappear, I mean, these days? And at first he said no, but then we had a couple drinks and he said, I think it's possible. Because I said, I mean, come on. I said, come on, you cover, this is 5,000 square miles. What do you do? Someone's actually flying over that every week? Sure. And he finally admitted, yeah, you know, if you burn your wood right and if you do this, and that's in the book, you know. This character's burning her wood so that it doesn't, you know, show. So things like that I got, and things like how, you know, this one kid I interviewed, I say kid, he was 21, he, you know, what did he eat? He you know, he harvested tubers and berries, and he had them in jars, and he had them labeled, and he was an interesting person. He had no sense of smell, so he had to get it right, and he had a book of herbs, and, you know, he made all his own clothes himself. He refused to wear or eat or use anything that wasn't man-made except for his gun and something else I can't remember, but and how he cured hides. He showed me how he did that. Yeah, it really was a worthy trip. It was really, and I met a guy who was really scary.
Now, I read the book and it really had my heart thumping. There are some very, very exciting scenes in it. But I'm the kind of guy that really likes characters more than plots, and I thought the characters in this book really rang true to me. I thought they were very believable characters. But I'm wondering, if a female reads this book, are there going to be things that strike a chord with her that just passed over my head?
Oh, what a great question. Well, it's a book, there's a lot on female friendship in the book, which, you know, you're a guy, maybe you don't. There's something, very, very integral to female friendship in the book that maybe a guy would not pick up on, although hopefully the way I told it, you certainly got a feel for it.
Oh, sure.
You know, the way women are, and you know, we're all humans interacting, so.
Indeed, yeah.
I think I'm glad to hear that you, as a guy, like the book. I have heard a lot of men say, well, I love the adventure element, you know, and I love the rafting element. I love being outdoors. But it's good to hear the female friendship struck a chord, too.
It certainly did. Is there any possibility that Winifred could make another appearance in a future work of yours?
I don't think so, because I just don't conceive of books like that. You know, it's the whole prequel sequel thing. My mind, it doesn't work that way. However, if paid enough, it probably would.
Let's talk about
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're saying. Let's
Yeah.
talk about the business side of publishing.
Sure.
A very unique publisher published your book. Tell us about Scout Press.
So Scout Press is a division. Well, there's Simon & Schuster, it's, you know, one of the big five, and one of their divisions is Gallery Press, and under Gallery is Scout Press. Scout Press is a new press, 2 years old, I think, with Ruth Ware, who wrote In a Dark, Dark Wood and Women in Cabin 10, being one of their premier authors. So I was honored to be one of their very first authors as well, and so that was fantastic. Also, Bloomsbury bought the British rights, so this is the. I just love cover design too. I mean, the cover I think the cover is beautiful.
I think it's great. Did you have some input in that?
Well, I think in my contract it said I can have significant input, but in other words, theirs is the final decision. But I love it. You know, it looks like you're in the water. It's churning. That's the American one. Is everyone seeing that? And then this is the Bloomsbury British. So this is in, you know, England, Ireland, Australia, New Zealand, all the English-speaking world. Just thought it was very cool. And this is another version of it where you open it. It's knockout letters, and then there's this eerie, scary water, and here's the audio. So that's all fun. I probably didn't answer your question.
Close enough.
Okay.
It was a great pleasure meeting you, Erica Ferencik.
So good
Thank
to
you
meet
very
you.
much for coming and visiting
Thank
with
you.
us. What's next?
My next book is a love story / survival thriller that takes place in the Peruvian Amazon. I'm going there in 2 weeks to do some research for a month.
Terrific. We'll look for
yeah.
the next thing that
Okay.
attaches your name to it. We really appreciated your coming tonight. We certainly appreciated you writing such a good book.
Thank you so much.
Erica
Peter.
Ferencik, our guest on the Bookshelf. Thank you for joining us. I'm Pete Solomon. We'll see you next time.